Now we're getting into Module 11C. This is focused on formulating countermeasures. So we're going to define countermeasures and tell you the difference between a countermeasure and a countermeasure set. So we're defining countermeasures. We got three critical things we got to include. Number one is just a description of what the countermeasure is, but we need some detail. So really put some detail in. I've got a couple of examples I'll show you in a few minutes. And then, once you describe it in detail, specify the key action steps that are going to be required to actually implement and complete that countermeasure. Once you've done that, now you have a plan for it. Once you've done that, we've got to evaluate the countermeasure on its own against the selected evaluation criteria that we've already defined and put weights on. Then, through experiments, simulations, brainstorming, we want to verify the evaluation of each of those countermeasures. So that's the way we're going to actually test to see whether a countermeasure is effective without just doing a brainstorm if we can. If we can, we want to run a real experiment in the workplace on the problem and see if it works. But if it does, you got to remember that there are still other options. So we got to test those as well. What we're really trying to do is build this series of rapid PDCA cycles so that we can determine very quickly which of these options is going to work the best. Now, every workplace is a little bit different, so you're going to have to tweak this a little bit here and there just to make this work. And sometimes actual experimentation is going to be impossible, so you might have to build a computer simulation or actually build a physical simulation off-site away from the work area. Other times you might just have to get some smart folks around the table and ask them very deliberately, what do you think is going to be the impact of this one? And we rely on their experience as we try to confirm what's going to give us the best option to solve the problem. So let me take you back to the cause analysis as we go into this very creative structure of 5 whys to 5 ways. Now, I've been in a lot of other places. I know GE used to say you can't progress without identifying 7 ways to solve it. But then what I typically saw was they came up with 7 different countermeasures, but they might not be mutually exclusive. And so they can do countermeasure 1 and countermeasure number 2 and countermeasure number 3. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about 5 distinct, separate, mutually exclusive ways to solve the problem. What do I mean by that? Well, for each one of the root causes where you see I've got countermeasure identified for each of these root causes, you're going to have to come up with 5 ways to solve it. 5 mutually exclusive ways. So let's just say your problem is that we got to get from Columbus to Baltimore. I'll put that because I just made this trip. So one option is you could fly. But there are hundreds of options to fly. Southwest runs a direct flight from Columbus to BWI several times a day, but sometimes they have to run through another city before they can get to Baltimore. If you fly on Delta or American, you're definitely going to have to fly to a hub city before you get to Baltimore. I think Delta, most of the time I've got to either fly to Atlanta or Detroit before I can get to Baltimore on this. But each one of those flights is mutually exclusive because you can only do the one. Now, let's say you want to drive, so that's another completely different option. So if you want to drive, each route is going to be mutually exclusive. But even in the case that you see here, there are some common legs on those routes. So just like there are common legs, you may have some action step that is going to be common to every countermeasure that you define. That's fine. It just becomes a countermeasure step. It's not a separate countermeasure on its own. So let's see how they stack up in the next industrial example that I've got for you.